Nobody wanted this scrapped battle vessel, until a human technician brought it back to life. The salvage yard stretched across the horizon like a graveyard of metal. Rusted hulls jutted into the air at odd angles. Some ships floated silently in the low-gravity lanes. Others were tangled in twisted cables and scaffolding, long forgotten by the galaxy. Pilots and engineers passed through quickly, only stopping to pick what they could sell, leaving the rest to rot. Among the countless vessels, there was one ship that drew attention, but not the good kind. It was a battle vessel, large and imposing even in its ruined state. Its metal skin was scratched and dented, the paint faded and peeling. Panels hung loose from the hull, exposing wires and conduits that sparked faintly in the darkness. The aliens in the yard avoided it. Many whispered warnings about the cursed ship, saying it had claimed the lives of crews and engineers alike. Nobody wanted it. But for a human named Eli Carter, curiosity outweighed fear. He had grown up on small forgotten stations where humans were outsiders. He knew how to see value in things others ignored. And when he saw the battle vessel lying there, silent and abandoned, he felt a spark he had not felt in a long time: opportunity. Eli stood at the edge of the yard, his boots crunching over rusted metal shards. He looked up at the ship. It was massive, even compared to the largest freighters in the yard. Its hull was scarred from battles that Eli could only imagine. Strange symbols ran along its sides, alien markings he didn't understand. But to him, it wasn't scary. It was like a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Everyone says it's dead," one of the alien salvages called out from a nearby platform. His voice was high-pitched, almost shrill. "We won't touch it, it's no use." Eli smiled. Humans were different, he thought. While others saw danger and weakness, humans saw a challenge, and challenges were what Eli lived for. He climbed into a small work pod which hovered near the ship and pulled out a scanner. The ship's energy systems were nearly gone. Most of the conduits were offline, the power core dormant. Yet, as the scanner passed over the vessel, he noticed something strange. Faint energy pulses. They were irregular, almost like the ship itself was breathing. "Alive somehow," Eli murmured. For a moment, he just watched the readings. Most would have turned away at this point. Most had called the ship a lost cause. But Eli didn't see failure. He saw a hidden potential. He saw a machine that had been abandoned because no one understood it. Not broken, just neglected. Eli knew he couldn't do much without access. The salvage yard was controlled by strict rules, and claiming a ship required credits he didn't have. But he had something more valuable: persistence. He negotiated with the yard's overseer, trading small gadgets and his remaining supply of parts for temporary access. Others snickered, thinking he was wasting his time. But Eli ignored them. When the gates opened and his pod floated closer to the ship, Eli felt a strange thrill. Walking into the ship's docking bay was like entering a cathedral of silence. The air smelled of dust and ozone. The walls were lined with panels, buttons, and screens, all dark, lifeless. Broken conduits dangled from the ceiling, clinking softly as he passed. Eli activated his portable lights. The corridor stretched far into darkness. Every step echoed in the empty halls, yet the ship felt aware. Not in the way humans are aware, but as if it had remembered something long ago and now it was waiting. He reached the control room, the heart of the vessel. The consoles were shattered, flickering occasionally, struggling to awaken. Eli knelt, opening his toolkit. He had a simple plan. Diagnostics first, repairs second. He touched the ship's panels, carefully tracing the wires, testing the circuits. Each touch was met with a faint pulse of energy. "Hello," he whispered, half joking. "Can you hear me?" Nothing answered, of course. But the pulse he felt under his fingers seemed to strengthen slightly. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it filled him with hope. Hours passed. Eli worked slowly, moving from panel to panel. He cleaned connectors, adjusted circuits, and rewired broken links. He made notes about each subsystem: the propulsion, the life support, the energy grid. Nothing was easy. The ship's technology was advanced, alien, and mostly undocumented. But Eli had one advantage: human ingenuity. Where aliens saw complex rules and systems that could not be bent, humans saw patterns, solutions, and workarounds. At one point, a panel sparked violently. Eli jumped back, heart pounding. Smoke curled into the corridor. He took a deep breath, then carefully isolated the problem. No other engineer in the yard would have attempted it. Most would have walked away. Eli fixed the short, reconnecting circuits in a way that looked almost like improvisation. By nightfall, Eli had activated a few of the vessel's minor systems. Lights flickered in corridors that had been dark for decades. The ship's internal sensors hummed faintly, scanning the yard outside. Doors that had been frozen shut for years creaked open, and somewhere deep inside the power core pulsed once, a slow, weak thrum that felt almost like a heartbeat. Eli leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. "You're not dead," he said softly. "You just needed someone to listen." He didn't know it yet, but the ship had been watching him. Not in the human sense, but it had sensors that were dormant, recording data, analyzing his methods. It had never encountered a human technician before. Most aliens treated it as an object, a tool to be used or discarded. But Eli treated it differently. He listened, adapted, and respected it. Slowly, the ship's systems responded to his actions, almost as if it recognized a partner. That night, Eli slept in his pod near the ship. The hum of reactivated circuits was like a lullaby. Every few minutes, the pulse from the core seemed to grow stronger. The ship was awakening. In the yard, aliens still avoided the vessel. They whispered about curses and bad luck, unaware that the story of the ship was about to change. Eli didn't care about their warnings. He had found something no one else had, a challenge that could be conquered with patience, skill, and creativity. By morning, Eli was already back at work. The ship had responded to small repairs, activating auxiliary systems that allowed life support to function. Corridors were lit, doors operated smoothly, and small diagnostic screens displayed coherent data. It was still far from operational, but it was no longer a dead hulk of metal. It was alive and waiting. Eli stepped into the central hall and placed his hands on a console. A faint glow spread beneath his fingers. The pulse he had felt the night before now moved in rhythm, responding to his touch. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but Eli sensed it clearly. "You're listening," he said with a smile, "and I'm listening back." The ship didn't reply in words, but Eli didn't need them. The pulse was enough. A connection had formed, the beginning of a partnership that neither human nor machine had ever experienced before. And somewhere deep inside the battle vessel, systems long thought dead flickered into life. It remembered what it was built for. And for the first time in decades, it had someone who could understand it. A human who saw potential where others saw nothing.
Eli didn't yet know the challenges ahead.
The ship was vast, complex, and filled with secrets, but he knew one thing for certain. The ship was not junk. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved, and he was the only one who could do it. The pulse continued to hum beneath his hands, growing stronger, steadying. It was a heartbeat. It was hope. And in that moment, Eli realized that what others had abandoned, what others had feared, could now become something extraordinary, if only someone had the courage to try. The sun rose over the salvage yard, its light reflecting off the jagged metal of the abandoned ships. Eli Carter was already at work, hovering in his pod beside the battle vessel that no one else had dared to touch. Overnight, he had learned a simple truth. This ship was not just a machine. It was a challenge, a puzzle that required patience, creativity, and a way of thinking the aliens had never used. The previous night's pulse from the power core had grown faintly stronger by morning. The ship was responding to his presence, but it was still fragile. Eli knew he had to be careful. One wrong move, and systems that had taken decades to degrade could fail permanently. He started in the engine room. Panels were cracked, wires frayed, and conduits twisted like tangled vines. Alien engineers would have followed strict protocols, trying to restore the system exactly as the ship's creators had intended. Eli did something different. He studied the patterns, watching how the circuits reacted to energy flows. Then he made small adjustments, rerouting power where needed, testing each connection carefully. As he worked, he talked to the ship. Not in words it could understand, he didn't know its language, but as a habit, a way of staying focused. "Okay, let's see if you remember how to breathe," he said with a grin. "Just a little life support." Nothing fancy. The lights in the engine room flickered, then glowed steadily. The faint hum of systems returning filled the hallways. Eli smiled. The ship was listening. Next, he moved to the navigation system. The screens were dark, covered in dust. He wiped them clean, finding alien characters that made no sense at first. Instead of trying to decode everything, he observed the way the system responded to power. When he adjusted the circuits gradually, the panels lit up in fragments, showing tiny pulses and shifting symbols. Hours passed. Eli's hands moved quickly, but carefully. He cleaned debris from the air vents, reconnected broken data conduits, and restored minimal life support to the crew quarters. It was enough for the ship to be habitable, at least in part. The most interesting part, however, was the ship itself. It had an AI or something like one. Its systems weren't fully conscious yet, but it was watching Eli's every move. Lights flickered in patterns that seemed random at first, but gradually synchronized with his work. When he reconnected a power conduit, a faint glow traveled along the ship's hull, as if it acknowledged the repair. By mid-afternoon, Eli paused for a moment. He leaned against a console, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're learning faster than I thought," he said. "Or maybe you've just been waiting for someone who actually understands you." For the first time, a screen blinked with a coherent symbol. It wasn't a word, but it was a response. Eli felt a thrill run through him. The ship was responding, not just mechanically, but almost emotionally. It was recognizing him as someone who approached it differently. He moved to the weapons control room next, not because he wanted to use the weapons, but because he wanted to understand them. Panels hung loose, circuits fried. To any other engineer, it was a dead system. To Eli, it was another puzzle. He didn't try to force it back online. Instead, he studied the circuits, tracing them carefully, and made gentle adjustments. After hours of patient work, the systems responded. Small lights blinked across the control panels. The ship's internal sensors scanned the yard, gathering information for the first time in decades. Eli's fingers hovered over a console as he watched. "You're like a sleeping giant," he whispered. "I just have to wake you gently." As evening approached, the ship's AI, still fragmented, attempted its first communication. A series of flickers along the console formed a rough pattern. Eli recognized it as a greeting, of sorts. Not words, but intention. You understand," Eli said, a little awed. "I'm listening too." He spent the night in the crew quarters he had repaired, surrounded by systems that hummed faintly but steadily. He could feel the ship's pulse through the floor, a steady rhythm that mirrored the life support he had just restored. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it reassured him that his work was not in vain. The next day, Eli explored deeper into the vessel. There were sections that had been completely sealed for decades. He found broken corridors, storage rooms filled with rusted supplies, and data cores covered in dust. Each discovery brought new challenges. The ship's systems reacted strangely to his presence, sometimes flickering, sometimes humming in response. Eli realized something important. The ship didn't just respond to repairs. It responded to human thinking. The aliens had tried to fix it with rigid rules, treating it like an object. Eli approached it like a partner. He asked questions, made hypotheses, and tested them. The ship was learning from him as much as he was learning from it. By afternoon, life support was stable throughout most of the ship. Lights glowed in the corridors. The AI signals became stronger, forming patterns that Eli could begin to recognize. He had restored enough function to run small diagnostic simulations. Each one revealed that systems long considered broken were only inactive. They were waiting for someone to understand them. Word began to spread quietly through the salvage yard. Some aliens noticed the ship's lights turning on, panels flickering with energy. Whispers spread. The cursed ship was alive. Ellie ignored them. Their fear had never made sense to him. He didn't need recognition. He needed progress. At one point, Eli sat in the central hall, looking at the vast corridor stretching in all directions. He could feel the pulse of the ship, steady and growing. The AI's signals were more coherent now, forming a subtle rhythm that matched his own movements. It was responding to him, adapting to his methods, and, even more surprising, anticipating them. "You're not just a machine," Eli said softly. "You're something more. And I think you know it too." That night, the ship's pulse was strong enough that Eli could feel it in his chest. Lights in corridors that had been dark for decades now glowed steadily. The hum of revived systems filled the halls. The AI, still incomplete, seemed to watch over him. For the first time, Eli felt a connection, not just to the machine, but to something alive, intelligent, and ancient. He slept lightly, dreaming of the ship's history. He imagined battles fought, missions undertaken, systems humming with life. And he imagined the ship waking fully, not as a weapon, but as a partner. The next morning, Eli's work intensified. He began connecting the navigation systems, carefully rerouting circuits and bringing the ship's engines online at a minimal level. Every success was small but meaningful. Panels glowed with coherent information. Sensors scanned nearby ships and the yard itself. And the AI, still learning, responded with growing clarity. Eli paused as he noticed something unusual. The ship had begun stabilizing power flows on its own. It wasn't just reacting to his work, it was learning from him. Patterns emerged in the lights, in the hum of machinery, in the way doors opened and closed. The ship was no longer a passive machine. It was active, aware, and adapting. "You're faster than I expected," Eli said aloud. "But slow and steady wins the race. We'll do this together." He spent hours teaching the ship, in a sense, guiding it to understand human logic alongside its alien systems. By evening, he had restored life support to the entire vessel. He had activated communication systems, and small diagnostic panels now displayed clear, readable information. The AI flickered across screens in a pattern that almost resembled emotion: curiosity, caution, and something like gratitude. Eli realized the full potential of what he was doing. This ship, abandoned and feared, was capable of incredible things. And the galaxy had written it off, not because it was broken, but because no one had understood how to work with it. He stood in the central hall, hands on a console, and felt the pulse of the ship as clearly as if it were his own heartbeat. "We're just getting started," he said. "But I think you like humans after all." For the first time in decades, the ship's systems responded with a full, steady pulse. Lights glowed in corridors that had been dead for years. The AI's flickers formed a continuous rhythm. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The ship was alive, aware, and ready to learn more. Eli knew the work ahead would be long. Systems needed full restoration, engines needed repairs, and the AI needed time to understand him fully. But he also knew something else. The ship had chosen him. Not because he had power or influence, but because he could think differently, imagine solutions, and see potential where others saw only failure. And as he stepped back to survey the vessel that no one else wanted, Eli smiled. The galaxy might not believe it yet. Others might still whisper warnings about the cursed ship. But he knew the truth. The ship was alive, and together they were going to prove that humans could make the impossible happen. By the third day, the battle vessel had changed. What once sat abandoned and lifeless in the salvage yard now hummed with power. Lights glowed in the corridors, screens displayed coherent information, and the faint pulse of the ship's core was steady, like a heartbeat. Eli Carter walked through the central hall, feeling the energy under his feet. The ship was alive, responding to him in ways no alien engineer had ever achieved. The salvage yard, which had once been filled with whispers and fear, now buzzed with curiosity. Word spread that a human had restored part of the cursed vessel. Other salvagers peeked cautiously at the glowing lights inside, watching panels flicker to life and doors open smoothly. Some aliens were impressed, though most remained skeptical. A few whispered to each other, "It's impossible." A human? Fixing a battleship no one else could? Eli didn't care about the gossip. His focus was on the work itself. He moved through the vessel systematically, carefully inspecting systems he had only partially restored. The ship's AI, now more coherent than before, flickered across screens and panels, responding to him in patterns he could almost interpret. It wasn't speaking in words, not yet, but it was learning, adapting to his methods, and even anticipating his next move. He approached the propulsion system. The engines were massive, alien constructs that had baffled engineers for decades. The outer panels were dented, wires hanging like vines. In the past, anyone attempting repairs would have followed strict instructions or walked away in frustration. Eli, however, relied on observation, intuition, and patience. He studied the energy flow through the conduits, adjusted power circuits, and rerouted connections that seemed faulty. The engines hummed faintly, responding to his careful adjustments. The vibration was subtle at first, but it grew steadily. Eli smiled. The ship was learning from him. Systems that had failed repeatedly under alien supervision were now working under human guidance. "See? Told you humans think differently," Eli said softly. "We don't just follow rules. We experiment. We adapt. And it seems—" "You like it." The AI's lights flickered across the panels in a rapid sequence. Eli interpreted it as a nod, or something like approval. The ship was alive, aware, and beginning to trust him. By late afternoon, the central hall was glowing brightly. Panels that had been dead for decades now displayed diagnostic data, environmental readings, and energy flow metrics. Life support was fully operational, engines were partially online, and navigation systems could chart basic courses. The ship, though not yet capable of full flight, had regained its presence. It was at this point that the galaxy began to notice. One by one, visitors arrived at the salvage yard. Officials, engineers, and merchants from nearby stations came to see the restored vessel. They had heard whispers of a human who had revived a cursed battleship. Some came in disbelief. Others came in hope, hoping to claim the ship for themselves. Eli met each visitor with quiet confidence. He didn't boast. He didn't beg. He simply showed what the ship could do. With careful gestures, he powered up panels, brought lights to life, and demonstrated the hum of systems once thought dead. The visitors' eyes widened. Some tried to replicate his methods, but their attempts failed. The ship responded only to Eli. "This is incredible," one alien engineer muttered. "I've studied this vessel for years." "Nothing works like this." Eli nodded. "It's not about power. It's about understanding. Most engineers treat machines like objects. I treat them like partners." The ship's AI responded with a series of coherent pulses across the panels. It seemed to agree. Eli smiled, feeling a warmth that was almost like pride. Not his, but the ship's. As night fell, Eli continued his work. The AI's communication patterns were becoming more advanced. It began forming sequences that resembled language, though still fragmentary. Small symbols appeared on screens, aligning with Eli's touch and actions. He realized that the ship was not just learning, it was thinking. It could anticipate, reason, and adapt to human methods. Other salvagers watched in awe. Some tried to approach, hoping to replicate Eli's success. But the ship ignored them completely. Its systems responded only to the human technician who had understood it from the start. Slowly, skepticism turned into astonishment. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. A human and an ancient battle vessel, working as one. The next day, Eli focused on the AI's learning systems. He traced data conduits, repaired damaged nodes, and allowed the AI to process new information. Each interaction brought greater clarity. Symbols became patterns. Patterns became logic. The AI began to anticipate Eli's actions, offering suggestions through flickering panels and subtle energy pulses. Eli realized something remarkable. The ship was evolving, not through programming, not through alien protocols, but through collaboration. Humans could think differently, adaptively, creatively, intuitively, and the ship recognized that. By mid-afternoon, the vessel's engines were fully functional. Though it remained docked, it could now maneuver within the salvage yard without external power. Lights blazed in the corridors. Doors and lifts operated smoothly. The AI flickered in a rhythm that Eli interpreted as excitement. It was ready to test its abilities under human guidance. As word spread further, news reached distant colonies and trade stations. Pilots and engineers arrived, eager to witness the miracle. They expected fearsome power or destructive potential. Instead, they saw a human and a ship working together, demonstrating ingenuity and cooperation. Some aliens approached Eli cautiously, offering credits, technology, or fame in exchange for control of the ship. He refused politely. Fame and wealth were not his goals. He wanted to restore the vessel fully, to understand it, and to prove that humans could solve problems where others had failed. "It's not for sale," Eli said to one wealthy merchant, who frowned in disbelief. "This ship deserves better than that. It deserves understanding, not exploitation." The AI seemed to understand. Panels flickered in a continuous pulse, almost like a nod. The ship trusted him completely. By evening, Eli walked through the central hall, surveying the fully restored life support, glowing panels, and active sensors. He could feel the ship's pulse through the floor. It was steady, strong, alive. It responded to him in ways that no other being had experienced. "The galaxy doesn't understand you," he whispered. "But I do. And together, we'll show them what humans can do." The next morning, Eli began testing the ship's mobility systems. Small thrusters fired carefully, lifting the vessel slightly off the ground. The hum of power was steady. The AI's communication sequences became clearer, forming logic patterns that could be interpreted. It was learning rapidly, adapting to human reasoning. Visitors crowded the salvage yard, watching in astonishment. The cursed ship, long abandoned and feared, was no longer lifeless. It was functional, responsive, and intelligent, and it was responding only to a human. Some aliens muttered in disbelief. Others whispered with envy. But Eli remained calm. He knew that what mattered was not their opinions. It was the partnership he had formed with the vessel. The galaxy might not yet understand, but the proof was clear. Humans could succeed where others had failed. By late afternoon, the ship's AI displayed something unprecedented. On one of the main screens, symbols aligned to form a sequence that Eli interpreted as a greeting. Not words, not language he knew, but a clear attempt at communication. "You want to talk?" he asked, smiling. "We can do that." Over the next several hours, Eli experimented. He learned to understand the AI's sequences, teaching it to recognize patterns, logic, and basic reasoning. The ship responded eagerly, adapting faster than he had expected. By nightfall, they had established a rudimentary dialogue, one that transcended species, technology, and protocol. The ship, once abandoned and feared, had a partner it could trust, and Eli, once just a curious human technician, had found a companion unlike any other. That night he sat in the central hall, looking at glowing panels, active life support, and the steady pulse of the ship's core. The salvage yard was quiet, save for the hum of revived systems. He could feel the intelligence within the ship, aware and responsive. The galaxy was beginning to notice, yes, but Eli didn't need recognition. He had accomplished something far greater. He had proven that humans could think differently, adaptively, and creatively. That ingenuity could awaken what others had given up on. And as the stars began to shine in the distance, Eli knew that the ship was ready for more. Not just repairs, not just mobility, but for what it had been meant to do: explore, protect, and reveal the hidden potential of human ingenuity. For the first time in decades, the ship hummed in full power, lights blazing through corridors long dark. And somewhere deep inside, systems long dormant finally remembered their purpose. The galaxy had dismissed it as junk. But Eli Carter and the human way of thinking were about to prove them all wrong. The stars stretched endlessly above the salvage yard, distant suns twinkling like scattered jewels. The battle vessel, once abandoned and feared, now gleamed under the light, its hull repaired and systems fully operational. Inside, panels glowed with coordinated energy. Corridors once dark and silent now pulsed with life. The ship's AI had learned to communicate in patterns Eli could understand, and the vessel hummed with intelligence, anticipation, and something almost like pride. Eli Carter walked through the central hall, boots echoing on the polished floors. It was a strange feeling seeing a ship that once inspired fear now glowing with vitality, and knowing that he had brought it back to life. But Eli didn't feel pride for himself. He felt excitement for what lay ahead. The ship was more than a machine. It was a partner, a being capable of thought, adaptation, and perhaps even curiosity. "Ready to see the galaxy?" he asked softly, placing his hands on a console. The ship pulsed in response, steady and strong, as if it understood him perfectly. Over the next several hours, Eli tested every system. Life support was stable throughout the vessel. Engines roared to life without strain. Navigation arrays were online and functional. Sensors could detect objects across vast distances. Even the AI's internal learning algorithms were optimized, capable of analyzing, predicting, and adapting in real time. Other salvagers and curious visitors crowded the yard, but Eli paid them little attention. They had come to watch, some hoping to buy, some hoping to study. The vessel ignored them entirely. Its systems responded only to Eli. For the first time in decades, the ship had chosen a human, not just to repair it, but to guide it. "Humans are different," Eli said almost to himself. "We don't follow rules. We experiment. We adapt. And we inspire." The AI responded with a series of pulses and lights across multiple consoles. Eli interpreted it as agreement. The ship, a once feared battle vessel, had learned to trust him, respect him, and even rely on him. By the following day, Eli had begun testing the ship's mobility in the yard. Small thrusters activated, lifting the vessel smoothly off the ground. The engines hummed in harmony with the power core. Lights along the hull gleamed under the yard's artificial sunlight. It moved like a living thing, powerful, aware, and responsive. Visitors gasped, unable to comprehend how a single human had revived a vessel that entire fleets of alien engineers had abandoned. "You've done something no one else could," one alien observer whispered. "It responds only to you."
Ellie nodded. "It doesn't respond to power."
"It responds to understanding. Humans see potential where others see failure." With careful adjustments, he brought the ship to hover higher, testing its engines. It moved gracefully, the AI adapting to Allies' commands instinctively. For the first time in decades, the vessel left the ground under its own power, proving that it was not junk, not cursed, but alive. News of the restored vessel spread quickly. Messages reached nearby colonies, trade stations, and even distant worlds. Aliens who had once laughed at the ship now approached with cautious curiosity. Some brought technology, some offered assistance, but Eli remained focused on one goal: full restoration and understanding. The ship was not for sale. It was not a weapon to be exploited. It was alive, and it deserved to explore. Over the next several weeks, Eli and the ship tested every system, slowly unlocking its full potential. The AI continued to learn, not just from commands, but from observation, experience, and human reasoning. The vessel began to anticipate obstacles, optimize power flows, and even suggest routes and repairs. It was no longer a machine. It was a partner. Eli realized that this ship could do more than fight. It could explore uncharted space, assist in rescues, stabilize colonies, and perform missions that required intelligence, adaptability, and creativity. Its potential was unlimited, but only with humans guiding it. One evening, Eli stood on the observation deck, watching the stars drift past. The vessel's pulse was steady, like a heartbeat. Its AI communicated in light patterns across the control panels, forming sequences that Eli could now interpret as emotion, curiosity, even something resembling trust. "You're ready," he said softly. "Not just for the yard, not just for the galaxy, but for what you were always meant to do." The ship responded with a strong pulse, almost like a nod. Over the following months, the vessel became a symbol across the galaxy. Other abandoned or feared ships began sending signals, hoping for human guidance. Colonies reached out for assistance, and aliens who had once doubted humans now sought their expertise. Eli and the ship worked together, solving problems others considered impossible. Despite offers of fame, credit, and influence, Eli remained the ship's technician and partner. Fame was unimportant. Understanding was everything. He had formed a bond with the ship, a bond of trust, respect, and mutual learning, and together they proved that humans were capable of seeing potential where others saw only failure. One day, Eli received a message from a distant colony. A ship similar to the one he had restored had been abandoned decades ago, left to rot. The colony asked if he could assist. He looked at the ship's AI, which pulsed in excitement. "Shall we?" he asked. The vessel responded with a strong rhythmic pulse. Together, they leaped into hyperspace, leaving the salvage yard behind. The stars stretched into streaks of light as the vessel moved faster than anyone had expected. The galaxy watched in awe. A human and a once-abandoned battle vessel were no longer just a curiosity. They were a symbol of ingenuity, creativity, and the ability to restore what others had lost.
They were proof that humans could succeed where others failed, not through force, but through understanding, patience, and imagination.
Eli looked at the panels and smiled. The ship's AI pulsed in response, synchronized with his own heartbeat. They were partners, explorers, and pioneers. Together they would journey into uncharted space, uncover lost technology, and help those who had given up hope. And somewhere deep in the vessel, systems long dormant finally remembered their purpose. The ship was no longer a weapon. It was a guide, a protector, a friend, and a testament to what humans could achieve. The galaxy had once dismissed it as junk. Entire civilizations had abandoned it, feared it, or mocked it. But with Eli Carter at the controls, the ship proved them all wrong. Humans could see potential where others saw nothing. They could breathe life into the forgotten. And they could change the course of history, one small, determined step at a time. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and Eli knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with forgotten wonders, abandoned vessels, and challenges no one else dared face. But humans, curious, adaptable, and courageous, would rise to meet them. The ship hummed, steady and alive, ready to explore, its pulse synchronized with Eli's own. Together they leaped forward, leaving fear, doubt, and abandonment behind. In the quiet of the cosmos, a new legend had begun. A human and a battle vessel that no one wanted, now partners, now explorers, now a shining example of ingenuity and hope. The galaxy would remember this moment, not for the ship's power, not for its history, but for the human who believed that nothing was truly lost. And with that belief, they would face the stars together, undaunted, unstoppable, and alive.